So it's about being mindful of how we communicate. And likewise for Daniel, you go in and like to work a room. You like to work people. And if somebody is not high influence, they're going to be like, who's this guy? Like, he's fake. He's trying too hard. Like, we all have these judgments, right? When we're not working with people that are like us. And so it's really important that we understand.
Building a successful real estate career requires you to adapt, pivot, and constantly master new skills.
We're Katie and Daniel Steinfeld. We've built our own innovative brokerage, and in this podcast, we've assembled actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to take your business to its maximum potential.
It's time to level up. Level up. Level up.
Level up. Welcome everybody to Level Up. Today is a very special episode because we've got a great friend and industry professional, Michelle Reese, with us today. Michelle was named one of the top 50 women in Canadian real estate according to REP magazine. She's a published author for Forbes and an active member of the Forbes Real Estate Council. She's earned a reputation for being an industry leader, which we have seen in real life as she goes. She's born into the real estate industry. She began her career over 20 years ago and has served in multiple roles to help grow one of Canada's largest real estate franchises. She's the owner and broker of record of Royal LePage Connect Realty, the owner and founder of the Aligned Agent Academy, and host of the chart-topping podcast, the Aligned Agent Podcast, which is an amazing podcast you guys have to check out.
Absolutely.
And your whole aligned method just really speaks to both Daniel and I. I think it's so refreshing for our industry. So do you want to talk a little bit about that first before we
Sure. Well, first, let me say thank you to both of you. You guys are always so generous with your time and your willingness to sort of collaborate with people. So I really respect that. So thank you. It's an honor for me to be here with you guys. And I think, we've only known each other not that many, years, but it feels like, and hopefully I'm not speaking just for myself, but it does. It feels like we've known each other for such a long time. And I think that speaks to, our commonalities and our goals and vision and values, and really just wanting to make this industry as amazing as it could be for the agents that are in it. So kudos to you guys for what you do, because I know, outside of family, which is ultra important to you, and your brokerage, you both give back to really elevate and level up the industry for so many. Yeah. So thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what can I say? I mean, I've been in the industry for many, many, many years in many, many different roles. And it dawned on me very early on that from my experience coming in, trying to get into sales, and you thought, most people would have thought that would have been so natural because I had literally grown up in the industry. Mm-hmm. But I faced the same struggles and challenges and that feeling of being an imposter in this industry, the same as everybody else does. And that to me really spoke volumes, because I kind of looked at that and went, so it's not knowledge that's, really causes the success. It's not years of experience that really leads to what success is. So what is it that really causes people to create success in this industry? And why is it that so many people are struggling and so many people, regardless of their financial success, are not enjoying the fruits of their labor? And so I started in my natural way of asking questions of why. Like, I'm one of those people that just has to understand the why. I'm not the one that takes the answer and just says, oh, okay, and then carries on with it. It's
that must be it.
But why? Yeah, I was probably that really annoying child, right? But why?
Yeah.
But that curiosity really is the only way I know how to navigate life. And so I really started doing some research and started, testing out the market and asking questions. And I came to a few realizations. One, we all struggle. It doesn't matter how perfect of a match in terms of, I know we're going to be talking about disc profiling and all of that, but it doesn't matter how, close of a match you think you are or other people think you are. We still come to the table with apprehensions and fears and insecurities, and we just don't ever believe that we fully measure up. Two, I think the industry has glamorized hustle and grind. It certainly glamorized the, that wolf mentality, right? The wolf of Wall Street, like just get in there, be direct and firm and get this done and results oriented. And those are all great qualities. But when we're kind of skewed to look at that as that is the ideal we have to be working towards, when that's not who you are, it makes it really, really hard. And so that's kind of where the align, methodology and the alignment really was birthed from. Was, wouldn't it just be so much easier if we could all just understand what our own blueprint is and kind of shut everything else out, that those external influences that make you feel like you're not enough, that make you feel like you have to do your business one way, or your business has to look one way. And if we could just kind of align with ourselves and our goals and vision, oh my goodness, I felt it. The minute I kind of, came to that realization, it was just like, oh, wouldn't that be nice? And the reality is it's possible. It's just that there's not enough people talking about it. And so that's really what kind of spawned my, where can my voice be heard? And that really was what developed the podcast and the Facebook groups, and just my ability to get out there and use whatever influence I've gained over the last 20 plus years, and really just share the message that it doesn't have to look one way. And if you're struggling, there's a reason. It usually has to start with what's going on in our minds. And if we can start there and really get comfortable with what are our profiles, like what's our blueprint? What is my blueprint? Because my blueprint's very different from yours, very different from Daniel's, very different from other brokers in the industry. And so as realtors, when you come in, naturally, whenever you're learning something, and we know this from kids, right? They emulate. We look to other people. It's like, how should I be doing this? And that's so natural and normal. But at some point, the switch has to flip. Yeah. And you have to kind of come back to, what is it that you want? What's going to feel right for you? Because there's not one way of doing the business. We know that everything works because we see people doing them, but what works for us? And so that's really where I come from, from that place of alignment.
Yeah. No, that's so refreshing. And I think that gives a lot of people hope that they don't have to be a hard-nosed salesperson to make it in this industry. They can design it the way they want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that the beautiful thing? I mean, when you think back to when you came into the industry and what kind of your reason for it, wasn't it to be able to create this amazing business in life, and one that's going to support the lifestyle, dreams that you have? Because we are very much a lifestyle business.
Yeah. And we're becoming more of that too. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of potential for that down the road for a lot of people. So,
and people believe what they see and what they're told and what they hear without diving into themselves enough. And this is an industry where, as we know, there's tons of people, and they're continuously coming in with a picture in their mind of how it's supposed to be. And sometimes it's what they want, and sometimes it does match who they are. Yeah. But I think this is going to be very refreshing for us to really take a step back and look at how much we really understand, what will help align us and what our profile is. And, are we, living our best real estate life and professional life within the types of people that we really are. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. So we reached out to Michelle because she is certified in the DISC profile analysis. And so when we reached out, she was so giving of her time, and actually just got us thinking about how we could make more content surrounding this whole profile analysis. So we're going to have a second parter to this podcast. But the first part is having Michelle on and just talking about how our profiles match up to us working in this industry as agents. As you guys all know, we're also in a broker owner job setting, but we want to make it relevant to everybody that's listening. And we think that as an agent, it would be nice to know what kinds of profiles and personalities match up to different things in this industry.
Yeah, well, I'll first start off by saying this. So some people may have already, as soon as they heard DISC, kind of went, because it has been, in my opinion, misused in the industry. I think there have been, select brokerages or brand names that have used it as a screening tool where they're looking for a specific profile. This is what they want for their sales team. And so they have every, agent that's applying to join the brokerage go through the DISC. And they use that again, in a way that if you don't match the profile that they're looking for, they don't really give you much confidence to believe that you can, really do the business on your own. And so maybe I'll start by just giving a really brief overview of DISC for everybody, just if you've never heard of it. So DISC is a personality and behavior profile analysis. It's an assessment tool. It's used in multiple situations in multiple industries. It helps bridge the gap with communication or miscommunication in team environments. It helps to match people up if they're growing a team or scaling a business so that they know, who should we be bringing on, what's going to be a good fit for the role that we're looking for to hire for. And they use it for screening purposes to really, if you are creating teams, to be able to say, this is going to be a good dynamic. Or, if you have this dynamic, these are some things that you might want to watch out for. I use it a little bit differently. So I use it, I'm very much a believer, again, coming back to alignment and understanding what our blueprint is. And so while DISC is not the be all end all of it, it is a great assessment tool for us to be able to kind of extract and understand who are we as people. How do I communicate best? What are my natural strengths and what areas might I be struggling with? And so I take this natural blueprint based on how people have answered the questions, and I apply it to the business, but I don't apply it in the, to be a strong salesperson, you have to have a high dominance level because that's the results-oriented, goal-oriented profile. I use it more in the respect of where might you excel naturally, so that we can do more of those things. And where might you have some struggles or challenges that we can help to support it? And so DISC measures 4 behavior traits, and these 4 behavior traits we all have. So according to the DISC theory, we all have these behavior traits, and they're known as dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. Now, for those that are listening that might have taken DISC before or are more, comfortable with DISC language, you may have heard some variations in those titles. Yeah. So sometimes compliance is labeled as conscientiousness. So the actual terms used are obviously reflective of Thomas Organization, which is where I'm certified under. But they all mean the same thing. So we have 4 behavior traits. Each one of us has them. What changes amongst us is that intensity level. And it's that intensity level that really demonstrates those differences between us. Why, if we all have dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance, then why do we behave differently when we're under pressure? Why are some of us more able to go after goals regardless of fear, and some of us get stopped by that? Why are some of us better with more routine, structured environments, and other ones are like, don't even get me there? And it's because of those variations in the intensity level of these factors. And based on that, whether it's a high intensity or a low intensity, that really determines specific behavior traits. Right. And so once we get a really good picture of ourselves, then we're, I think that level of self-awareness, which is huge in entrepreneurship. Like, I think at the end of the day, one of the most important traits that I think really matters most to success is self-awareness, because you can't meet people any deeper than you know yourself. Yeah. And when you're in a people environment, constantly working with different personality types and different ways of communicating, that level of awareness has to be there. You have to know how you operate best so that you can kind of adjust yourself to meet the needs of the people. And that, when it comes to negotiating, when it comes to communication, that's really the essence of it all. It's not how you need to communicate, how do they need to hear it? Right. And so I take those and I look at that blueprint, and then use that to start conversations with people on, okay, so now that you know this about yourself, what do you see is kind of, coming to the surface for you? Like, do you see why maybe the scheduling method you're using for time management might not be a lot, best aligned with you? Or can you see how you're trying to approach lead generation this way, but based on your profile, you actually would prefer to do it opposite? And so how can we align those? And so I know you're going to get into, in a future episode, much more sort of detail and depth in terms of team dynamics, and really going, deeper into that. But I think I'll kind of leave it there, not to complicate anything, and just kind of give that sort of foundation piece on what DISC is and sort of how I use it.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I can say this, and to everyone who's listening, I guess it might be apparent already that we both did fill out the questionnaire. We've both gone through the DISC profiling process. And I will say, as someone who is by nature, I believe, but you'll tell me, a bit of a skeptic and a bit of someone who almost with questionnaire things like this feels like you can control the narrative, or sometimes you subconsciously see the answers and say, this is going to lead to this, and that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
So I'm going to answer that. I can say that this was a refreshing approach in that the way that it worked was you chose a most likely or a most and a least of a series of answers that seemed very dangerously similar to one another, where, you know, whether or not I subconsciously wanted to control the narrative, I don't think I did. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
But it was nice because it really, I think, is going to open my eyes to things that I've tried to not get answered in the past appropriately.
I don't want to know.
Right. So give us the hard truth or the good truth.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the way the DISC is structured, it's known as an ipsative test. So it forces you to choose between two things that are most like you and two things that are least like you. Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes difficult for people, but that's where the science is in, you can't really falsify it. Like our instinct as human, we all want to belong and be liked, right? Like that I think that just kind of goes with human nature. Mm-hmm. And so when you're answering questions, especially if it's somebody that, you know that's kind of conducting the assessment, you want to be seen in the best light, right? We don't want people to know all of our dark shadows. And so your instinct is to want to answer it so that you look favorable. But the way the test is designed, with all the similarities of questions and the repetition of the questions just being asked in different ways, if you were trying to control the outcome, it would come back invalid. And so it would automatically recognize there's too many inconsistencies in how you're responding. We need to redo the test. And so it actually wouldn't even give me a result from there.
So we both passed.
You both, yeah. And that's the beautiful thing, right? Like, it's not even about passing and failing. It's just, you've got to be comfortable, obviously. And I usually tell people when they're filling it out, don't overthink it. Like, just whatever that first instinct is, go with that. That's usually the right answer for you, because that's what's first coming to mind. But when it forces you to choose between two things that are least like you, you're like, well, none of these are like me. Like, none of this sounds like me. But that forcing of, well, if I have to choose, I would go with this. And that's really where the science behind is it that it works so well, and why people are so shocked when they get the results. They're like, how did you get all of this information about me just from these little, 21 or 22 simple questions, right?
Well, that's the thing. It was really quick, as long as you have, and I know when we were doing it with Victoria, it was like, you need to have 20 minutes of uninterrupted time. And she knew we had 4 kids. So it was like, you need to find, like, just, I know it's hard, and so we took it very seriously when we were both at the office separately, we did it. And it doesn't take long at all. So we got our reports back. We did glance at them, but it was hard to really decipher what exactly it all means. But yeah, maybe we can get into like what your, I guess, initial thoughts are like on.
Yeah.
Scared.
Don't be scared. And here's the truth. Because you're going to dive into team dynamics, I'm not going to go into too much detail about each of your individual profiles.
Okay, cool.
So that'll make more sense, when you're actually going through that. Yeah. So here's what I will say. In the DISC language, each of you has a profile name. Yeah. So Katie, your profile would be known as DCI. So your highest factors are, apologies, I'm looking at the wrong one. Your profile is DC. DC. So you have a high dominance, high compliance. Okay. And Daniel's is IDC.
Ooh, fancy.
Okay, so 3 high profiles. Yeah, you guys got a lot of similarities. But again, we're not going to talk team dynamics. I want to save that so that it's all fresh for you guys when you guys do that episode.
We need to meet an S to hang out
with us.
We do.
So yeah, and that's what you'll kind of run into when you really go in depth into team dynamics with Victoria, is when you are building a team, or if you do need support, what things should you be looking for? And that for the realtors listening as well. I mean, our first instinct when we get to a certain level of business is, I need help. I want to and they go for the first new hire. And you end up naturally wanting maybe to choose people that are like you, right? Because you get along, and that might not necessarily be the best fit depending on what role you're trying to fill.
Right.
But based on your profiles, what this tells me is this. So for Katie, with yours being high dominance, high compliance, it tells me that your strengths are really in being a self-starter, in being naturally direct and competitive and assertive. You're goal-oriented. You like to know what is expected and get out there and achieve that goal. And then with your compliance, it tells me that you're not just about getting results just for the sake of getting results. You want them to be accurate. And so you're very much focused on information and policy, what is right. You want things to be correct and done properly. There has to be a system and a procedure for things. And so you're not somebody that's just going to be achieving results for the sake of achieving results. You do put an emphasis on quality. Okay. And so you're very influential in your own way based on the information that you know. So you are somebody that would likely lend itself to be an expert in something. So you know a lot about a lot of things, but you have that tendency to really want to be an expert, really have that area of expertise, which I think, you're involved at RICO, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you take a look at your involvement with RICO, and it really is about the rules and guidelines and making sure that, everything is operating properly, that so much aligns with who you are and your natural focus and appreciation for doing things right. Like there's rules in place, and we need to follow these rules. And how do we make them clear? How do we set guidelines and procedures for people? So that's totally your love language, right?
Rules.
You should have made your DISC profile part of your campaign. It would have been helpful.
Yeah, really. Yeah, really, really. And so, when I take a look at those being your strengths, I mean, let me ask you, so knowing that those are your strengths, where do you see that being a great fit for when you're working with clients?
I mean, I think it lends itself to my level of professionalism and just my, I'm trying to think of the word, like the trustworthiness and the loyalty I'll have with people, because I don't like err outside. Like I don't take risks, especially, well, I do take risks, but not with other people. And so I can see how that definitely fits in. And even when we are implementing like some sort of a marketing campaign or advertising, I want to make sure it's correct. It's following the rules. I'm not, and I want to know that I'm right. Like, I don't want to just say, I think this is how it's to be interpreted. Like our auction thing is like a perfect example of that. As we were going through that exercise of figuring out, are we breaking any rules? I would be like, okay, but I need to see the rule and understand it and make sure that we are falling within the guidelines. So I can definitely connect with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you wouldn't let any stone go unturned. Like
Right.
that naturally lends itself to you being a really great problem solver. Again, if there's a problem and you know what that final outcome needs to be, you're going to do what you need to do to figure out all of the workings around it to make sure that happens. And so you're really great at being able to handle those, problem situations, because you're not going to be overly emotional about it. You're going to kind of you have that natural ability to be very systematic and logical the way you think. So it's very much like, okay, what doesn't matter in here? Let's get right to the crux of what the problem is and let's figure out a solution for it. So problem solving is really going to be a great strength when you're working with people, and your ability to lend that level of knowledge that you have that most people wouldn't take the time nor would have the appreciation for. So you are a natural educator. It doesn't surprise me that you kind of, were inspired to move into more brokerage management roles, doing the podcasts, wanting to help people and give back, because you do have that, again, you have that appreciation for knowledge and information, and you also want to be able to make an impact and impart that on people. And so you do that. So your level of information and knowledge and expertise is going to come out as, very visibly when people work with you. And I'm sure if I ask you right now, like, what is one of sort of the feedback that you get from clients? Their testimonials, what is it that they're saying about you?
Yeah, no, it does really connect with those qualities for sure.
Yeah.
On the flip side, like, I'm just wondering, because I know, like, I guess from clients that will typically want to be very talkative and want to, like, I feel like No,
You don't like that?
yeah, I can adjust, to like try, but like that is not my type of person. And I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
It's more apparent now.
So that speaks to where your low factors are. So with your disc profiling, I said you're a DC. So your low factors, which are the supportive factors, are your influence and your steadiness. So influence really speaks to, whether or not you are external people focused or internal task focused.
Right.
And you are somebody in all preference, right? It's not that you can't. And remember, we all have these 4 behavior traits, and we all have the ability to flex those muscles and adjust and adapt, right? And we do naturally. But your most preferred way of being, or most comfortable way of being, is to be more task focused, not so much involved in the emotions and the people and like being liked. And, we all want to be liked and we all want to belong, but that's not a primary focus for you. Like, you would strike me as somebody that would be okay to be able to make a tough decision, even if it meant you looked unfavorable or somebody might not like that, right? Whereas that would cause people, like some people, to put on the brakes, like, oh, no, like there's no way I can make that decision. And so that low influence, low steadiness, as that name already kind of, gives it a lend to, is the pacing. And so your natural pacing is that you like to be mobile and active and restless. And if I was to ask you to sit down at a desk and do routine work, consistently all day long, you'd probably pull your hair out. You prefer to be more mobile and active and have variety in your day. So it doesn't mean you can't sit down and do routine work, but you have a low boredom threshold. It's like, okay, give me something next. Now, again, I'll frame this by saying this is all based on how you answer the questions, right? So I can't get into your brain. I'm not a mind reader, but based on how you answer the questions, that's what the profile is showing us.
Right.
Is that you have the ability to be flexible and adaptable, which lends itself then to real estate, which there's a lot of moving pieces that's not going to feel stressful for you. Whereas for somebody who has high steadiness, who prefers to be very thorough and, very slower paced and follow through properly, when things go awry or there's too many things going on, it stresses them out. So it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to cope, but are they most comfortable in that situation?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Like even from like a prospecting and just like a scheduling perspective, like if I'm trying to do like these few things every morning in order to like keep in touch with my clients, I definitely get bored very quickly. And I'm just like, I don't want to do this. Like I'd rather like pick a time in the day where I can fit it in and then do it versus have a time block and knowing that that's what it is. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. And you can see where then knowing that about yourself, put yourself back in that new agent position.
Yeah.
When you come in, and with all good intentions, right? We're all broker owners, right? So with all good intention, coaches, managers, broker owners, we want to see people succeed, but we are only able to deliver what we know. And so what we know is what we know works for us. And so without realizing, there's almost this unspoken, here's how you should manage your time. Yeah. Here's what your day should look like. Here's how many hours you should spend doing this. And this is what it should look like in your day. And that doesn't work for everybody. And so if, the more, again, coming back to our blueprints, the more we know about ourselves and can really just own up to that's, it's great. And I know it works for somebody because it's obviously working for somebody, but here's some challenges that I'm running into. And then the more you know about yourself, you can kind of go, okay, so maybe I don't work best with strict, rigid schedules. Some people do. Some people need that. And I think on some level, we all need structure, but what that structure looks like, if it's not aligned with who you are, it's always resistance. There's always going to be resistance and it's going to feel hard and it shouldn't. So there's ways of building in structure where it's got a little bit more flexibility, where if you kind of just know what your top 3 things are to do every day to keep your business moving, you have the freedom and autonomy to decide when that's going to work. If it's after the kids go to bed, if it's on lunch hour. But if I was to say to you, Katie, you're going to wake up every morning at 6 a.m. You're going to do your exercises, but 9 to 11, you're going to be prospecting. From 1 until 3, you're going to be doing your client follow-ups. From 5 until 7, you're going to be doing this. Okay, you might look at that and go, great, I like the clarity, right? Because you are somebody that likes to have clarity. But when it comes down to it in implementation, it's not going to feel natural for you.
Mm.
And it's going to feel too rigid and structured. And then you're going to resent the fact that you don't have the freedom, which is what you really wanted when you got into the business to begin with.
Yeah.
Right? Is to have that ability to be flexible and adaptable. So it comes down to, if you look at your schedule either now or when you were a realtor, what were some of those challenges that you were facing with time management?
Yeah, I think for me, I just wanted to do a heck of a lot more than I knew I could ever fit into a day. But I couldn't, and I still can't say to myself, okay, like you're being like ridiculous right now. How are you actually going to accomplish all that? And then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh crap, I've only done half of these. One thing that's really helped me, and when you mentioned the top 3 things, I got the Full Focus Planner, which is like one that really focuses on, okay, what are your top 3 for the day? And if you can just accomplish those, then it's a good day. The rest, it's like you can do it or carry over to another day, and that's fine. And it actually has little, I'm looking at it now. It has like little icons that allows you to defer things. And so knowing that I have the ability to defer, like I'm given the permission to do so, I feel like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to defer that and move on. But when I see that, like yesterday, for example, I did accomplish all my top 3, and I'm like, this was a great day. I did it, and I did it in my own time. I figured out when I was going to do it, but it got done.
Yeah. And that really speaks to outside of profiles. That actually just speaks to how our brains are wired. And so again, a lot of what I do when with the Aligned Agent Academy and all the programs and support is looking at part of your blueprint is how are our brains wired to stay motivated, and how are we motivated to achieve things, and how can we really hack the way our brain is programmed to our advantage, because our brains are not meant to move us to success. That's not what it's wired for. It's wired to keep us safe and to keep things familiar and to keep things efficient. And so it's not always going to align with your goals and visions unless you understand that. So going with the top 3, I call it the commit to 3. When you can commit to 3, that works for just about anybody. Because what it's doing is it's tapping into the reward center of the brain. And we all like checklist people that are listening right now. For those of you who love checklists, there's a rush when you get to check something off that it's been completed. And that's why you come back to doing checklists, because it feels good to feel organized. You got a visual and it's like, check. And then when you're done, it's like, the reality is those lists are never done. Those to-do lists, they're like laundry. They just, there's always something to add to it. So when you commit to 3, you're giving your brain what it wants. You're teaching it that it's going to give you this dopamine hit every time you accomplish a goal, which is going to then further help the motivation. So it's a great strategy for anybody. You have an appreciation, like you mentioned, I like to get things done, right? And I want to have everything there. You're not willing to get things done at the cost or expense of getting it done right.
Right.
I
can't in my conscience cross something out if I know it hasn't been fully done. I'm deferring it.
You're deferring, and that's why you love that, because it's like, oh, okay, I don't have to compromise my values. I don't have to compromise my level of perfectionism. And so, perfectionism is also a strength and a challenge, right? It's great because I guarantee if I was to go through any of the contracts you've written up for your clients, they would be perfect. There's not going to be a spelling mistake. You're going to make sure everything is gone through with a fine-tooth comb. So accuracy is really important for you. So when we take a look at, even lead generation now. So if I was to say to you, so actually maybe you can tell me when you were, really actively focused on sales, what did you find about lead generation? What sort of strategies did you love or what ones were not really working for you?
Yeah, I hated door knocking. I made myself do it, but it was honestly torture for me. Just meeting new people and trying to but I did do a lot of open houses. And what I found was easier about that is I knew at least people were coming and interested and it was more starting a conversation, which made it easier, I think, for me. But definitely more behind the scenes. If I was more active now, I think I would take more the digital ad strategy. I feel like I'm pulled towards that direction. a lot more than like cold calling or anything like that.
Because it's, again, there's that low influence part coming in, right? It's you are great in small situations, intimate conversations. You are great at sort of building those connections with people, but to go out there and be the life of the party might not be your comfort level.
Yeah.
And so it can feel exposing. It can feel like, ugh, like this is not how I want to connect with people, knocking on their door so cold like that. Like, I'm about relationships. I want to know about you first, right? And so it's hard to do that with certain lead generating strategies. So again, it's not that people who don't have high influence or whose profiles are you're sitting there saying, oh, I hate door knocking too. It's not that you should steer away from them from doing that. But again, if you can kind of ask yourself, is there another strategy that might be better aligned with me? Right. And it doesn't surprise me that you would pick, online leads, because again, you don't have to get out there and be verbal and communicative and in people's faces. Yeah. You get to slowly build and nurture those relationships through a process, which you love. Yeah. And then when there's opportunity, you're there because you've warmed up, they've warmed up, and you can just take it and run. So it doesn't surprise me that would be kind of what you choose.
And it's interesting because now I feel like I've developed or created a really strong repeat and referral business for myself. Like, that's all pretty much I do right now. And because I love keeping in contact with the people that I've done business with in the past. I love working with people that refer me to them because I know they're similar to how their personalities are. So it's like, I'm not guessing. I know I can just like fit right into that. So yeah. And also just building upon like the community thing. Like we're trying to build a community within our own area, like just to get our name out there and things like that. And I love the process of just building that and getting more people like understanding who we are and educating them about real estate and all that. Like, that is like what drives me. And it might be, I guess, a longer play for some people. But I love that process of just building that, which is fun.
Yeah. And I think there's always a trade-off, and, we always have to weigh out our decisions. There's always a quick way to do things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, where is that going to take you? Are you going to burn out in 3 years because you don't really love that?
Yeah.
And if you can find that happy medium where, okay, it might feel uncomfortable at the beginning, but I could see myself doing this, and these are my strengths, and I know, this is how I can apply them. Yeah. You'll enjoy it more. And if you enjoy it more, you're going to do more. And then your longevity is there, right? Because now you're not going to hit that wall going, oh, why did I get into this business? I hate it. Right. And we hear that, right? We hear that a lot from people.
100%.
So Daniel, let's kind of talk about you for a little bit. So you have a 3-factor high profile. Your highest factor is influence. And then your dominance and compliance are actually equal. And both of you have that. Both of you have equal dominance compliance factors. And so that, again, really speaks to your ability to be influential, but influential in different ways. You have a natural influence, Daniel, with that being your highest factor. So you are much more people focused. You love getting out there, being able to naturally persuade people. Chances are you just have to kind of engage into a story about, your favorite restaurant, and people have already bought into it. You don't have to rely on the facts and the price and the location. It's just like the experience of it. Mm-hmm. And that's actually the difference in the two of you in terms of how you would communicate. Mm-hmm. Where Katie, you're again, very information focused, right? So when you speak to people, you're going to be imparting on them everything that is important for them to know. Like if we're talking about going to lunch, you're going to give me we should check out this restaurant because right. It was rated this. It has vegan and gluten-free on the menu. It, it's only 5 minutes away. And so you're going to give me all the information about it, which is going to be helpful for people who that's what they need, right? To be able to make decisions. And, I'm only going to assume, Daniel, but I think if we were talking about lunch, you might just kind of lead into, I went to this restaurant. It's like, I know it's maybe 15, 20 minutes away, but you walk in and you get the smell of this, and they have fresh herbs, and you would tell the story. Mm-hmm. And so that storytelling is how you persuade people to see things your way. So your influence comes that way, but both of you have that appreciation for being influential with information. Mm-hmm. So you might not see it as much with Daniel because his highest factor is the influence level. So he's going to probably lend itself more into being more persuasive, and storytelling and sharing, and as opposed to leaning automatically into the facts and all the important things.
I think it's interesting because you're right, but I think I'd look at it as being influential with a rule book. Is kind
yes,
of is how
definitely. You both have an appreciation for rules.
Yeah.
Like neither of you are sort of the ones that are going to be like, I'm going to do it my way. It's you have an appreciation for guidelines, clear expectations, processes. You're both very logical thinkers that way. And you have very similar profiles. The only difference is between the two of you is that high influence. So that's the one that we're going to see most readily and immediately from Daniel, if we had to compare and contrast the two of you. So when we take a look at Daniel's, again, it's very, very similar. You have an appreciation for things being accurate and correct. And so with both of you having that equal dominance, equal compliance, here's what we end up finding that you might find where you get stuck is when you kind of vacillate between, how can I put this? You vacillate between, I need to get this done, but is this the right decision? Mm-hmm. So you're not just going to quickly make a decision because, this is the direction we need to go. So there might be hesitation. There might be maybe what looks like as procrastination to some people, right? If they're not a similar profile, so that you vacillate between wanting to get things done, but wanting to get things done right. Making decisions, but I have to make the decision, but that decision has to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And before we decide to move ahead on things. So you're both very careful. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be highly reactive, which is great, right? Because when you're dealing in an industry and with people that is highly reactive, you can be very level-headed. Yeah. So you're able to kind of talk people off ledges.
I think that in the industry that we're in, and whether it's dealing with our clients, whether it's dealing with our agents as the brokerage, that is definitely us. Anytime a decision, and most of them do, will be impacting people who aren't ourselves. Mm. Because I think we feel a really strong responsibility in that being right and being perfect approach, if it's going to impact somebody else. Mm. I do think, we're the same way with ourselves, but to a lesser degree, like we've jumped into things and maybe our experiences are shaping our profile as we go. And that's
for sure.
Interesting. Do DISC profiles, can they change, or are you what you are for the long haul?
Yeah, so they can change, but they're not drastically. Okay. You're going to have pretty fixed traits. My assumption from looking at both of yours, because again, what the other thing that DISC does, which we won't really talk about today, is it takes your natural profile and it also shows us, are you making behavior modifications in your current work role? And if so, what are those modifications? What is it that you're changing about your natural way of doing things in order for you to feel like you need to do to be successful? And what behavior modifications do you make when you're under pressure or in a crisis situation? So we do adapt and flex, but both of yours, those dominance and compliance factors, they still remain stable. So we have stable traits. There will be some that can fluctuate. Like I know with me, my steadiness has fluctuated. I've done a few DISC profiles. Sometimes the steadiness is high, sometimes it's lower. And that to me is really a reflection of where am I at in my life. When I was managing an office, my steadiness was high, but that also lended itself to, I was very routine in that role. So I had learned to adjust and adapt, that I was very thorough. I had to check things through and, very paced. Whereas when I've taken on other roles, even actually right now as a broker owner and doing all these different things that I'm doing, I have to be adaptable. A strict routine would not work for me because I have to be able to be responsive. So I think there's certain factors that will change, but there's going to be ones that are pretty fixed. Like that is who we are. You could never be not compliant. Okay. Right? Like that would actually just be a conscious decision that could be not defined. Your natural preference is to want to have things done right.
Right. So as an influencer or like a high I or however you want to say it, what would be different lead gen methods that would be useful or connect well?
Well, okay. So Katie, you mentioned, the door knocking was kind of like, oh, do I want to get out there? Daniel, how do you feel about getting in front of people?
It's so interesting because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and this doesn't necessarily fit, I guess, what we're talking about. I can't stand door knocking either.
Right. Well, listen, there's a whole stigma around door knocking,
And maybe
right?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, though, you're right.
But even getting on the phone too.
Getting on the phone.
Yeah.
For me, I like from, I guess, the D&C, I like to lay the groundwork to have the table set for the conversation first. But the moment that conversation starts, I'm in my element, right? So for me, and this is like, there's so many examples. Like we talked about auctions. When we run an auction, the phone is ringing off the hook with people asking questions because it's a new thing. And I'd say I field 95% of those discussions because generally they turn into a half an hour of just relationship building and answering the same questions, but at the same time influencing people about why it's a good idea and why it's okay and what's good about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one or two you're okay with, but you can't be bothered with that. Or conversations, yours will be 3 minutes long.
Well, that's the thing. Like I just given the facts, the cold hard facts. I'm not getting into anything else. So it's very interesting.
The nature of the way we deal with people is very different. Like we both are very big on repeat and referral, very big on that. But for me, it's maybe it's the same for you, but for me, it's very much constantly relationship building through discussion, through entertaining. Like a lot of my approach is from let's entertain, let's keep people feeling good. But like we said, being governed by the rules of what's right. So I think for me, the best way to put it is we both have the same end game and we're both following the same set of rules, but I start by operating in the gray a lot more. So I don't open by giving the facts and the facts and the facts. I start with, let's soften the room a little bit. And then let's get to some of the end game I want. So it kind of adds a step, which makes things longer.
Right.
But then when it is, right? And when you look at the sales process, right? So when we can kind of reduce down everything that we kind of do, there's an opening, right, to how we work with people in initial conversations. There's our methods of communication. There's our ability to close people, customer servicing, our administration, our presentation styles. All of these sort of things fit into this sales process. And so you can see, you've kind of just spoken to a few of them where your openings are going to be very different. And depending on who you are with, they're either going to respond immediately to that or they're not. And that's where this level of self-awareness and knowing your blueprint comes in, because, we kind of started off the conversation about, it's not so much about how we want to work best and how we want to communicate, because you both have very similar methods of communication. You're both strong in being able to direct people. You're both strong in being able to have written communication. Like you don't mince with words. You're very clear. You're very descriptive in things. You probably enjoy writing emails, and in terms of communication. But Daniel has the added one of that persuasion. So we all have our kind of preferred ways of communicating, but when we're with people, it's so important to be able to speed read them, to say, are these people that need, so you kind of, Daniel, you kind of said in a very lovingly way, Katie, you just can't be bothered with some of that stuff, right? Like the warm and fuzzies, or to coddle, or to kind of, and it's because she's got a goal in mind. She knows how she's going to get there, and she leans on where her strengths are, which is like, once you know the facts, guys, the decision's going to be easy. But if somebody needs to have that small talk, they might look at that as, oh, maybe she doesn't like me. Right. Or maybe, like, we always have these two sides, right? So I'm very similar to you, except I have low dominance to both of you. So I have high influence, high compliance, and low dominance. And so I'm very internal and reflective when I think. So I've become very aware of my RBT face. RBF face. Sorry, I got that wrong. Right?
RBF.
RBF. So it's like, I get very serious. And so people who don't know me, if I'm not consciously aware of that, I'm listening. Like, I'm a very intent listener. So when I listen, it looks like I'm disengaged. And so I've had that feedback lovingly from people that kind of said, like, you just didn't look like you were really interested in what I was saying. I was like, no, I was listening to you. Right. So it's about being mindful of how we communicate. And likewise for Daniel.
Yeah.
You go in and like to work a room. You like to work people. And if somebody is not high influence, they're going to be like, who's this guy? Like, he's fake. He's trying too hard. Like, we all have these judgments, right? When we're not working with people that are like us. And so it's really important that we understand, how do we adjust and adapt our ways of communicating to the people that we're working with, and how do we speed read people? Because there are certain defining traits. You don't have to be certified in DISC to kind of be able to pick up on things, right? So you kind of know by, if somebody's high dominance, they're going to demonstrate certain traits, like a very firm handshake. They're going to maintain eye contact with you. They're probably going to be quick paced, like, they're on a mission. They got something to do. Very much about facts. They want the facts. They don't want emotional stuff, right? So they're going to demonstrate certain characteristics in how they communicate via email or respond to your emails. So if you're giving an email that's got a lot of information, they're going to respond back with like one line.
Yeah.
It's like, get to the facts. Don't need all this other story stuff, right? Whereas if you have high influence people, they're very much the people that you'll notice in a room right away. Yeah. Because they're charismatic, because they're talking and they're expressive, and maybe their dress is also reflective of that. When you're dealing with people that are high steadiness, they're not going to be as direct and forceful. They're probably going to be listening more. They're probably going to be the nodders in the room, right? Where they're just nodding to acknowledge. They want to make sure that you know that they're listening. So they're nodding a lot. And so they're going to be quieter. They're more supportive. They take on more supportive roles than lead roles. And then people who are high compliance, again, are going to be, they're actually going to be a little hard to read. Yeah. People, high compliance people, because again, they're just, they enjoy facts and details. They're not going to be overly give too much expression on their faces, hence the RBF face, right? It's like, we're just doing our thing. I just do my thing, and I'm not really paying too much attention to that until I am. And then I'm like, oh, I better smile because people are going to think something, right? So they're very diplomatic. They're probably the ones that in the group are like, trying to calm everybody down, like, okay, you want this and you want this, and they're trying to make it all work. They're very diplomatic in how they handle things. So you can very quickly pick up on where you think somebody is, and if you know that then about them, and you know where your preference is to want to communicate, you can say, okay, this person is a high dominance person, and not really getting a sense that they love a lot of chit chat. So probably not going to want to warm up the conversation and just get right to it. Yeah. And you would adjust that. And Daniel, that might feel so foreign to you. Like, that might be like it feels too cold. Like, you're not able to nurture the relationship, but that's what they respond to best, right? Because they don't want the small talk.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sure we both have questions.
I'm thinking of, like, I always want to be to the point with people because I figure they're the same, wanting the same for me. And so I find when we're talking to somebody, I'm the one that's like, okay, let's like wrap this up, because I think they want to stop. But like, in reality, like, some people are wanting to be talkative and want to have the story and all of that. And I'm like kind of pulling them away. So I think you made a really good point of just like recognizing what other people are and being able to like cue into those quick tricks, so that you can kind of try to adjust your own approach is really
and too, when you know how you operate best, what's wrong with saying, I want to attract more people like me?
Yeah, that's true.
And then that really then plays into, then let's talk about lead generation. Let's talk about your ideal client avatar. Who are you trying to attract? Who do you want to serve? And who will you best be able to serve? And so that's where that alignment comes back in again. It's like, once you know this about yourself, use it. This is like golden stuff, right? You can say, this is great. I know I'm going to be happiest if I don't have a strict schedule. I know I'm going to be happiest when I have the ability to, be more flexible or whatever it is, or be able to warm up a room and network, and, get out there and just be around people because I get energized by people. Knowing all of that is going to help you make those decisions that are going to feel right for you, as opposed to, well, Katie's doing it like this, so maybe I should too, because Katie looks really successful and she's done really well. So that must work. That must be the right way to do it. And then we end up falling into someone else's way of doing things. And then we wonder why we feel like imposters, right? Because we're really not being ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I hope the question comes out the right way.
Yeah.
Because it becomes not confusing, but it creates a lot of questions when I've got 3 of the letters there and they're all considered high, right? So for me, I just wonder would the D and the C, or if you've got 3 or 2, do they sort of pluck at your major one, or can they temper another one that you have to make, I guess, I don't want to say to the detriment of the I, but for me, I guess an example I could give you is I will never speak unless spoken to is one example. So when we talk about wanting to be the life of the party, absolutely. I'd love to be the guy who's on stage and all that. But if I'm not invited, I won't be the guy to jump on stage and take the mic. And I don't know if that's because of the dominance or the compliance kind of pulling at the I and saying, okay, you like this and you're good at it, or people like it or whatever. But at the same time, it's not what I strive to do. It's just something that when I'm in it, I'm comfortable, if that makes sense. So
absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
Talking to each other, like the different letters.
Well, I think we have to be really mindful too, whenever we're taking these kind of assessment profiles, that they don't take into account your past experience. They don't take into account your emotional intelligence. There's a lot of things that make up our human performance and our human behaviors that these don't take into account. So you might have a belief system around what that looks like if you were to invite yourself to something and you were not asked. And that might be what's running, again, of knowing the brain and how we're automated and wired to behave. The brain comes right back to those belief systems. And so if you have a belief, and that could have formed when you were young, you might have been told, don't speak unless you're spoken to. Like, don't interject your opinion. That's rude. You might have been, and so you create this story, and that forms your belief when it's repeated enough, and your brain uses that belief as the lens. So there's a lot of different dynamics that really influence our decisions and our behaviors. So there's not one clear cut, but, to answer your question, I think in my experience anyways, when you have more than one high factor, all it is they're already high. So if you needed to flex that muscle, it's already halfway there. You can adjust and adapt. Whereas if you've got only one high factor that's driving your behavior and the rest are all low, and you had to bring that influence level up, let's just say, but all you had was high dominance, it might feel like that transition might not be as natural or as easy to accomplish. So it just, again, we have all of these behavior traits. It's just our ability to understand which ones are most comfortable for us, because that's going to be our go-to mechanism. And when we need to change, what do I need to do to change that? Which muscle do I need to flex? And most people, like I said, when I do this with realtors, I find that those that are have been in other positions before that involved being around people, when I see their most natural self-image graph and it's low influence, their work mask, which is like, how are they behaving in the work role? Their influence has come up. So it tells me they've already learned how to exercise that. And they recognize that when I'm in an industry, as I am right now, where I have to be around people, I'm going to have to turn that on. And so both of you have kind of demonstrated that ability to adjust those things. Katie, it's, even though your preference might be to, not be overly talkative and, be out there communicating around people all the time, you do that. In fact, actually, I was actually surprised, because I actually would have pegged you as a high influence person.
You've got a podcast, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
well,
yeah, I know. It's funny because of how the questions were worded. Like, there were some that I'm like, I almost chose one other one, but I think naturally, and I know when we were talking on your podcast a little while ago about like the introvert and the extrovert, and like
that comes into play too, right?
Yeah, because like I pull my energy from being alone and like independent work and things like that, and I can go out and be extroverted and talk to people, but once I'm done that, my energy is down and I need to reset, or I am like, I can't keep going.
Yeah. And is that the same for you, Daniel?
That I like to recharge for sure, but I get driven by the activity. Like if one of us had to go home or whatever, if someone's going to run out of gas, it's her 10 out of 10 times for sure. But I mean, but the other side of that is from, a scheduling routine perspective, even though we're both low in steadiness. Yeah. I couldn't be lower in that. Like, I'm happy that's low, because for me, anything that isn't mandatory and fixed for a reason, I'm happy with setting 3 things, but yesterday was an example. I had
Yeah.
3 things set out, but when they were going to happen was completely up in the air as long as they got done.
Yeah.
I knew I had to do it at 9. I would have been stressed out,
Yeah.
really stressed out.
Yeah.
So
And so you can see, right, when you get caught into the trying to take someone else's way of doing things, if it's not aligned with who you are, you're going to meet resistance because it's not how you naturally prefer to work. And it's not to say that we should never change ourselves or we should never strive to adapt to situations. Adaptability is one of the key drivers for success, right? We have to be able to be adaptable. But when you know what that blueprint is, and then you start layering that in with, are you introverted, extroverted? What were your past experiences growing up? What beliefs are driving your decisions around money, around time, around success? Humans are way too dynamic to, keep it to a profile, right? Like it's a good benchmark to start from. It's a great place to come back to if someone is struggling, because you can refer back to it and say, okay, well, tell me, how are you structuring your day? Tell me, how are you engaging in presentations? Because again, we're going to have a go-to mechanism for how we relay and convey information. Some people are going to be very direct and just tell. Some people are going to be storytelling and more animated. Some people are going to be more listening and maybe not be giving the information that they need. And so we have to recognize where does our blueprint put us? And then being aware of that so that we can adjust.
So with your Align method, like, do you take this into consideration? Like, is this like a bigger factor for you in your like coaching and training of people?
Yeah. So when I work with agents and we're looking at diagnosing problems, right? Like if they're saying that this is, they're doing this and it's not working, my immediately is to kind of let's go through the profile so that I can see how that they're wired best, right? What is their natural way of doing things? But I actually, with the Align method, is really more focused on the mindset and the wiring of the brain, and how we use, what are the beliefs that are driving our behaviors? Because more often than not, that's usually where the problem is. It's people saying, like, I had an email from one of the agents that was like, I just listened to your money belief podcast. Oh my goodness, this is I just realized that this is why I'm stuck. Because we have concepts around money. Are wealthy people different than us? Am I worthy enough? What is it going to take to achieve that money? Is money easy to make or hard to make? Is it easy to lose or hard to lose, right? So we have all these concepts and beliefs without realizing it. Those are running on a subconscious level. They're programmed. So if we don't ever bring those things out of automation and look at them, we're never really going to know how they're impacting our decisions. And so chances are, without speaking to this one particular person, it might be that she's setting all these amazing goals and she's got an amazing dream and vision and she's out there doing it, but she's holding herself back because money's equating to something for her. There's been people that have been successful at creating a 6-figure business. They can get their business up to, let's say, 200,000, and they just can't seem to go past that. And when you start digging in and start understanding, well, what's the story? What's your experience with money and 200,000? They might have a belief that when you hit a certain level, it means you have to sacrifice family, that you now have to be away from your kids more, or that you become ruthless, or, whatever that is. So I think a big part of alignment is knowing your blueprint of your personality and behavior styles, B, knowing the blueprint of how our brain is wired, and then C, looking at all of that and saying, okay, what we know about neuroscience and how we can hack the brain so it can be wired to align with our vision, as opposed to aligning just to keep us safe. How can we use all of that and really create a business that's going to support the life that we love? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for. Everybody nobody gets into business to lose money. The understanding is we want to be financially successful, but it's, what is that going to do for you? What is that going to look like? How is that going to impact you, your kids, your family, the people around you? What impact you want to have on the world? And so when you can align, things are more enjoyable, they're less resistant, and you really elevate that level of self-awareness, which, again, I said, is, couldn't be more important to success.
Yeah, that self-awareness, and then being able to, like, I really think there's a lot of power in reading other people and getting those cues, and then recognizing that, I'm not like the way I'm acting isn't the be all and end all. Like, you know, I've got to adjust my personality to match up. And especially if you're trying to get business from these people and make them into clients, they need to feel like they're connecting with you. And the only way you can do that is to, first of all, be self-aware of how you come off naturally, and then try to adjust based on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, and from your experience, you've had clients, I'm sure, that they're constantly asking, what would you do?
Yeah.
What would you do? And if you're not wired and that's not your blueprint, you might be like, I'm not going to tell you what I would do. Like, here, let me give you the facts, you figure it out. But what they actually need from you is affirmation.
Right.
That's how they're going to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
So you can give them all the stats and, you know, concrete information, and you can motivate them. But at the end of the day, they're waiting for I think you should do this. And so it's a fine balance of knowing, again, being able to understand, what does this person need to be able to make a decision that's right for them? Because, you know, if you're going into it, which I know both of you are very high in integrity, you know, you do want to make an impact. You want the best for the people that you're working for and working with. You're not going to go and try and persuade them to manipulate them. Right. And that's, you know, that's the fine line when we look at things like NLP. You know, we see both sides, right? We see how some people use it to manipulate, and some people really just use it to understand this is human behavior. What do you need to make a decision? It's because it's not what I want for you, it's what you want. Yeah. But you can't recognize that if you don't recognize it in yourself first.
For sure. Yeah. No.
I mean, yeah, that's a good kind of line to
end off
close on, because really that's the theme of all this is really, I mean, we're going to dive into these reports a little bit deeper now. It was really refreshing to hear that, though. Mm-hmm. And I do want to make sure everyone listening now is saying, okay, I love Michelle, whether they've heard you before or this is their first time.
That's right.
Can we just remind them where they can find you? And if they do want to learn more about alignment, all the fun ways that they can get in contact with you, other than just playing this podcast on repeat?
Yeah. You're so sweet. Thank you. Yes, I think, I mean, my website is michellereese.com. So it's just my name. That's pretty easy. On Instagram, I have the Linktree account in my bio. So I have all of the links there to the Align Facebook group, to the podcast, you know, any kind of free training courses that I'm hosting. So Instagram's probably the easiest place to find me. And again, my handle is Michelle Reese, so very easy to remember. Mm-hmm. But that's usually the best place. And I'm happy to kind of connect with anybody that wants to learn more about alignment. And I really, you know, I do it because I'm tired of seeing people struggle, to be honest with you. Like, it's just, we come in, and this industry is so much full of promise, and you can just, it has that lifestyle entrepreneurship a flavor to it. And yet very few are actually enjoying it. Like, even the top producing realtors, you can get to that level of success, but you're on holidays working. So is it really a holiday? And maybe it is, maybe that's how you want to spend your time, and that's cool too. But if your idea and vision is not coming to fruition, and you're kind of bumping into falling back into old habits and doing things that are not aligned to where you want to go, it's going to make it really, really hard to get there. So I'm really just motivated to help people get that enjoyment and that freedom and that, that financial success that we all want.
Yeah. And I think anybody that's seen you knows how genuine you are. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't met Michelle or seen her work, I can tell you from experience, like, she just wants to, like, even when we were starting our first, iteration of our podcast, which is now changed, but the amount of just help and support you gave us with wanting nothing in return, just sharing the knowledge, and that's what you're all about. And that's what I think this industry needs more of. It's so refreshing. So thank you for sharing with us today, and for the friendship. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person.
I know, right? Even us introverts are like, I still can't wait to get around people. Like, okay, I hit my breaking point. I need people around me now, right? At the beginning, I was like, I was good. Something. No, but I'm excited for you guys. Like I said, we really did not dive into your profiles, and there's so much to extract from it. And I know you guys you're gonna get all of that. And I'm excited to see what comes out of the next podcast episode.
Yeah, so are we. It'll be good. So thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you, guys.
We're all gonna close without a BRF, all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Level up.